Thanks to everybody that's tuning in, that's watching right now. Um, this is a really exciting moment. Uh, really, I think it's a historical moment. I don't think it's a overstatement to call it that. I think that this is one of the most important book releases of the year for sure, and in a long time. And I'm really excited today to be here with Lorenzo Kom'boa Ervin. This was originally going to be a part of the Atlanta Radical Book Fair. So before we get started in this really exciting conversation, I want to read a statement from the book fair that I have. And okay. The Atlanta Radical Book Fair began in 2016 as a collaborative project between local radical organizers, the Auburn Avenue Research Library on African American History and Culture, and On Our Own Authority Publishing, a radical history publishing house based in Atlanta. In the modern tradition of anarchist book fairs, our event was envisioned as a free public gathering of radical left writers, publishers, artists, activists, and community organizations across and beyond the Southeastern United States. From 2016 through 2019, we had the pleasure of hosting a variety of brilliant authors and speakers, including Yusi Kwayana, Modibo Kadali, Akinyele Umoja, Taylor Alexander, Cindy Milstein, and Ward Churchill, among many others. Now, for the second year in a row, the COVID-19 pandemic has stalled our usual plans for an in-person book fair. So the Atlanta Radical Book Fair would like to take a moment to thank William, Lorenzo, Pluto Press, AK Press, and our longtime collaborators at Auburn Avenue Research Library for helping make today's event possible. Our working relationship with the Auburn Avenue Research Library is particularly dear to us. They are a rare public institution that is tirelessly dedicated to the study and presentation of Black history, and they have remained our gracious hosts and collaborators throughout all of the turbulent events, both local and global, that we have faced over the past several years. Thanks also to everyone who has registered and attended this event. We hope you are safe and well. We hope you stay in touch with us via social media, and we hope to see you at an in-person book fair in 2022. So shout out to AK Press, Pluto Press, Auburn Avenue Research Library, On Our Own Authority for making this happen. This is really exciting. And I'm really looking forward to talking with you, Lorenzo, in public, because me and you talk on the phone all the time and we hang on the phone. But I think that one of the things that's come up before is that you drop so many jewels when we're talking on the phone. And a lot of times I'm like, man, I wish people were listening to what you are saying right now, because you have so many amazing insights from all this time that you spent in the movement and all of the organizing that you've done and all of the writing and thinking that you've done over the years. So let's just get right into this and get this conversation started. I know that you and I are really capable of talking for a long time, so this will be an exercise in discretion as well. But first, just to get started, how does it feel to finally see Anarchism and the Black Revolution published in this way after so many years? What sort of feelings arise for you? You have a legendary text that you wrote in 1979 that established Black anarchism. Tell me how it feels for you to be in this moment.
Well, I'd have to say that I'm thrilled that it's being published. I've also got a certain amount of reserve in that I have to see it to believe it. But I think that the book itself, a small pamphlet published in 1979 inside of a prison system, by the way, inside of one of the worst prison systems that existed at that time in Marion, Illinois, the federal prison, the federal concentration camp in Marion, Illinois. And so to be able to, out of that, a small 84-page pamphlet, to come out of that, what is now a book with potentially worldwide readership is extremely important. I mean, over the years, I've published or made attempts to publish the book, mostly by various print shops, Anarchist Black Cross and the IWW have published a number of them, but the reality is it's been limited in scope in terms of the people who read it. So now with the possibility of a worldwide readership, with the ability to change minds and change course, and as you say, it's got a worldwide input. Well, that has, to me, has to be seen for me to accept that it would have a worldwide impact. It may, and if it does, and of course, I'll be, while I'm on this earth, pushing to make that happen. That's my thing is, I'm not leaving it to chance. Whatever remaining energy I have is to push it, and to push people to think beyond the orthodox, think beyond the leftist mystique that's been given to us over the years, and to go beyond, for sure, state forms of socialism.
Yeah, man, it's definitely got a worldwide impact. I don't know why you're downplaying your impact. People have read this book all over the world, and that's something I said at the beginning of the foreword that I wrote for the book, was that you changed the world. And I don't think that when I'm saying these things to you, I'm not just trying to make you have a big head. I'm telling you, when you sit back and actually observe the impact that you've had, not just here in the United States, but in South America and in Europe, and the way that this text has moved throughout communities and throughout radical organizing spaces, despite not having the level of publishing and distribution that you have now. That's really impressive for an underground radical text that's talking about anarchism particularly. It's something that you should be proud of, and that you should definitely recognize as like an amazing achievement. So I'm not trying to gas you too much for no reason, man. That's just the facts.
Well, I am proud of it. I don't mean to imply that I'm not. It's my life's work after all.
Yeah.
But for 42 years of a book, to keep publishing and to keep coming up with ideas, keep building on ideas of a movement, really, that at some point, especially in the United States, it almost died out. When we talk about when I first became an anarchist, it was so limited at that time, and it was almost like a joke. It was a prankster kind of movement. And it was not a working class or revolutionary movement, not in the United States, and primarily lifestyleism. And so for me to come along and to challenge that, first of all, and to challenge the whiteness of the space that was anarchism at that time, to challenge that by my presence and by my voice, and through this book, through Anarchism and the Black Revolution, it was almost a weapon, a tool to change minds and to change liberation spaces, and that's what it's been doing all these years. Now, of course, I haven't been able to monitor it, is what I'm saying. I haven't been able to monitor it, even if I really wanted to. And so it's gone places and affected people in ways that I have not been able to, be sure of. I mean, I know prisoners, thousands of prisoners have been in a position to read the book because of, friends of mine, some of which I didn't even know at the time, who distributed into the prison system. Thousands of prisoners, tens of thousands of prisoners have read it as a result. And but I was less sure about, on the outside, actually, about who read it on the outside, who was affected by it, and the impact and the changes in thinking and so forth that had gone down. Now, I did know in the early stages questions around race and racism and, and the unfolding Black struggle. Those things were not being discussed in the anarchist movement. They were not being seen of any real importance in the anarchist movement until I came along and started pressing them to deal with this, to deal with what was essentially a revolution, which was unfolding, in a variety of forms.
Absolutely. And so you bringing up prison and the way that the text has moved behind bars. So let's talk about Martin. Let's talk about Martin Sostre and get into some of the deep history here that we're trying to raise for people to really talk about the importance and the significance of this particularly overlooked man, this giant who is actually not well known. And I think it's important to point out how this can happen in history in terms of ideological associations that people have and how things can get overlooked because of that. But just also just the fact that people can actually transform society and do things that are really impactful the way that your book has been and not be as well known. A lot of people don't necessarily know your work the way that they should, but that comes from another person. This influence comes from another person who is also not well known, which is Martin Sostre. So tell me about Martin Sostre and rest in peace to him. What did he mean to you and how did he influence the birth of this text?
When I met Martin Sostre in the New York City Federal House of Detention, I had been brought back from Germany with the plane hijacking case, and I was kept in the same facility as he was for about a couple months. And I met him, and there were other activists there as well, but he was the primary activist for me. He was Black, first of all the others were white radicals and so forth. And so I started talking to him, and we started having these conversations almost on a daily basis about my case, about the political movement and the political ideas and how the left and all this stuff was actually at a stage where it was in crisis. It was in a long-term crisis. Right. And we talked about an alternative socialism, because, I knew what socialism was. I mean, I had ideas even at that time. It's not like I was not an activist at all, but I had never heard of, what was presented to me as anarchist socialism, or later on I learned as libertarian socialism. I had not encountered that. I didn't know what it was. It was news to me. So we would have these conversations, and he would hit me up with it, expound on it, and so forth, and explain it. And, you got to understand that at that time, he was probably the best known political prisoner in the world. Certainly, he was one of the best known prisoners in the world. He had almost single-handedly fought for democratic rights for prisoners, the ability to get a book and read it, a radical book and read it, or Black literature, or ultimately even Black cultural expressions. And he protected the right for prisoners to be able to have hearings when they scoop you up and put you in solitary confinement. He'd been in solitary confinement for years, underground, physically underground, in a state prison in New York. And so he was a very serious individual when I met him. He was well known to those in activist spaces and activist struggles. Mm-hmm. But I didn't know anything about him until I met him. And we just had this conversation. He would speak to me every day. Every day he'd give me essentially what was a political lecture or political education.
Wow.
And I don't know if I was the only one. It's the only one I was the only one that I would see when I'd go there. So I don't know who else he was talking to, but certainly he had a tremendous impact on me at a time when I was really looking for an alternative radicalization. I'd come out of Eastern Europe back to the United States to be prosecuted, and I really was dissatisfied with the Black left and the white left and all the other formations, what I considered authoritarian leftism later on. But I was just totally dissatisfied with that. And so I was looking for something, and essentially he gave it to me. He opened the door for me, at least. He didn't give me everything I later knew. I mean, I'm not saying that, but he certainly opened the door for me and made me understand. And some things I even keep on a daily basis, and that is anarchism was never intended to or socialism was never intended to just be European or Eurocentric ideology. It is a universal concept and a universal ideology, or a universal political theory for people, for liberation, and for building a so-called free society, an actual free. I hesitate to use that because the capitalists used it so long and so fraudulently, claiming that America was a free society, and so I hesitate to do that. But that's basically what it's for: is to create a new kind of freer society that's not under the control of the state or politicians or intellectuals or whomever, but that's in the hands of the people themselves, self-governing socialism.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I've been reading so many of the writings and interviews with Sostre that we've been getting with the Sostre Institute stuff that we're trying to do. And he was just powerful, man. He was powerful. So when I hear you talk about him and you say that, you were just sitting there getting these lessons from him, I can only imagine how influential that was, because you can see in his writing and you can see in his words that he was a very, very intelligent theorist and a person who was doing a lot of critical thinking about the left and the history of the left. And
Indeed.
so, go ahead. What were you about to say?
And I was the beneficiary of that. Yes, he was rethinking a lot of things, just as I was, but I didn't have the tools and the knowledge at that time that he had. When he was able to share that with me. He could have just, do as a lot of so-called leaders and others do, and that is have the knowledge and use it in some way to lord it all over other people or to control people or control movements. He didn't do that. He didn't believe in that. He believed that the ideology and the ideas were here, they were universal, and they were to be used by all people all over the world. And so that was really an important thing for me. And I still believe that. That's one of the reasons we're calling it Black anarchism now, but my concept of anarchism is that it's inclusive. It's not just white folks. It's not just for white folks. It's not just for Europe or something or other. We've got to, just like racial capitalism, we've got to demystify it and make it apply to oppressed peoples all over the world.
And the funny thing about that, when you say that, is one of the things that I try to strike a balance with is, when you say that, I also feel like we also have to challenge white anarchists who particularly want to make Black anarchism into something that's like diversity, equity, and inclusion within the left. And it's like, it's not that either. You're not just some token like form of anarchism just to be presented as, hey, anarchism's diverse. It's not about just being included, but it actually is something that's transformative and that transcends the left in many ways, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's the reason we call it autonomy, Black autonomy, with the first reiteration of Black anarchism, which is actually the origin of Black anarchism. Reason we called it that is because we wanted to make the differentiation from so-called European or white radical anarchism, as something that we had to join, some club that we had to join. That's nonsense. And of course, the opposition to me even coming up with the idea of Blacks and others joining the movement, or that anarchism somehow would somehow be concerned about the conditions of oppressed Blacks in the United States, or colonized people around the world, colonized people of color around the world. Those things are immaterial, or they don't matter. And that's been specifically the ideology and the concept that anarchism has always practiced. They try to pretend otherwise, but that's a fact. They've never been concerned about the Black struggle. They've never been concerned about changing their own theories on their own, even to deal with so-called racism. They've never even wanted to do that. And when they attempted to come up with these ideas and these movements for anti-racism and anti-fascism, it's always been some kind of white perspective at the core of it. And so the whole idea of Black anarchism, or the whole idea of Black autonomy, is that it is an independent entity in its own right.
Right.
It shares many things, as you might imagine, many ideological concepts with anarchism, and with libertarian socialism and other iterations. And there are 10, 12 different names for the definition of libertarian socialism, libertarian Marxism, and what have you. And it shares many of those things. But in the sense, it's broader based because it's dealing with the condition
Mhm.
and the level of oppression of peoples of color, which is different from
Yeah.
what happens with white people. White people may be exploited as workers, but they are not oppressed in the same sense that, you know, workers of color are, and they're not shot and killed in the street because they're black, and, you know, this kind of thing, and on and on and on. They're not starving to death because of a system that's been designed to starve them, to put people in prison in massive numbers. All these things are not happening by accident, but most white people, including so-called activists, act like, you know, they don't know anything about it. They don't understand why it's happening, or that it's somehow some kind of singular thing that they can just do and reform it, you know, that kind of thing.
So two things coming up for me right now that I want to touch on really quickly before I ask you the next question. Just kind of go off to the side a little bit. I think anarchism has a language problem. And what I mean by that is that a lot of the terms and names, as you mentioned, that are associated with anarchism, including anarchism in and of itself as a classification, are widely disparaged and negative in you know, popular discourse and in the public imagination. So anarchism, as we know, people that's literally a synonym for chaos. Anarchy is chaos. It means it's terror. It's unorganized. It's or lack of organization. All of these things are a barrier for people wanting to actually explore it um, as an ideological standing. But also, when you say libertarian socialism, I've always avoided uh, libertarian socialism as a label and as a term, because I know that libertarian scares people off because they conflate the libertarianism that is associated historically with Europe, that is completely a different context, with the conservative, capitalistic libertarianism that we know here in the US. So I think, can you break down pretty quickly what you mean when you say libertarian socialism? Because
Well, first of
you
all,
say that in the text. And
yeah, there's always been, one of the things we need to understand, that there's always been a left libertarianism.
right,
And there's always been a left-right divide within the libertarian movement, first of all. And the left libertarian is at war with main so-called libertarian concepts of the Libertarian Party and other such movements, which are actually petty bourgeois, if not outright elements of the bourgeoisie.
yeah,
And so when we're talking about left libertarian, and we're talking about a kind of libertarianism which made up, for instance, one of the principal features of libertarian socialism, it was libertarian Marxism. There's
right,
always been a school of Marxism that was closer to anarchism, in fact, accepted anarchist ideology and so forth, and raised up in various historical moments, you know. And so we're talking about libertarian, and we're talking about liberating libertarianism, a libertarian ideology, in the same way we're talking about libertarian anarchism, taking anarchism from a very narrow perspective and a very just cultural, individualistic perspective, or taking it from workerism alone, you know, with anarcho-syndicalism, and turning it into a new kind of revolutionary ideology. And that was what I've always attempted to do with anarchism and the Black Revolution. It wasn't that I was trying to convince them that they should work with Black people alone. It was that anarchism needed to be radicalized in its own right. You know, it was too limited in the perspective, too staid in its analysis, too stuck in the mud. And it needed to go beyond just, you know, where it was in the when I came along in the 1960s. And then that opened the door for a lot of nonsense like the Zippies and the Yippies and the other kind of foolish groups of pranksters that came along in the 1960s, you know, and attached themselves to the New Left and so forth. There were other elements in the New Left that had potential the American New Left primarily, had potential, but they were sucked up into this whole idea of what I call left lifestyleism. You got this lifestyleism, and they don't do any practical organizing. They don't do anything to deal with poor people, the condition of poor people. They instead see themselves as some kind of day class. They're outside of the class struggle, outside of the conditions of poor people and so forth. And so therefore they just really didn't get it, or didn't get it when I came along and started talking about this, even though I was using some of their own language, their insider language. They weren't understanding that it was coming from a new place.
Yeah.
And that I meant some different definitions of what they should be doing, and different definitions of how to organize in urban areas and so forth, and how the world had changed. And urban areas in the United States have become black spaces. Mm-hmm. and spaces of peoples of color. How do you deal with that? How do you organize around it? And these are kind of things that I had been talking about for years and progressively raising it. And each book, each edition that I started with, first edition started with just the changes in ideologies, changes in thinking, or bringing forward radical thinking about what anarchism was, as opposed to what someone else said it was, what it actually was, what its history has been. And also challenging and attacking the state and ideological rivals who say that anarchism was just violence, or just chaos and so forth and so on. Well, of course, most violence does not come from anarchists. Most of the violence that was perpetrated back in those days was perpetrated as a result of civil wars and world wars and what have you. Those have been by the state itself, or by, in the case of the Marxist-Leninists, taking over power and crushing workers and people inside their own countries. This has been the primary sources of violence. It has not been anarchists did this or did that. They may have killed some head of state, or they killed some head of industry with propaganda by the deed. And although I never really accepted the logic of propaganda by the deed alone, at the same time, you cannot equate that level of violence with what the government has done. Millions being killed and families being torn apart, and at mass imprisonment, and all these other crimes that they've committed. It just covers up and makes people fear anarchism unnecessarily so. And in the United States in particular, it has been used for years, decades, to try to claim that anarchism just means endless, meaningless violence, violence without any perspective, any reasoning.
Yeah. I mean, you said a lot of things there I'm thinking about, and I know that you want to really get specific about what type of anarchism you're writing about and you're promoting. I know I'm wearing all black today, but I assure you, I'm not a lifestyle anarchist, Lorenzo. I don't want you to.
It never crossed my mind, brother. Why would I think? No.
So let's get back into the book, because I know me and you will get distracted and we'll start ranting. You wrote this in 1979, but it has enduring relevance, and its critiques of Western radicalism, state socialism, and a lot of the limitations of the left. So do you view that as a good thing or a bad thing that these criticisms are still so relevant?
Well, I don't know that it's a bad or good thing. I think that from my standpoint, it's people like to talk about scientific socialism and scientific this, that, and other. Well, I'll take them one better and say that, you have to look at the crux of an idea, but you also have to look at its history. And like, Leninism and Maoism, it comes with blood, comes dripping with blood. They crush their own people. They let their own people starve to death, and all this, just these statist experiments and to maintain power. And so we have to look at it in terms of that. when we talk about the failures of state socialism, if we talk about capitalism, and even talking about the so-called representative democracy, we have to talk about the majority of people are still locked out of this system, even with the so-called political parties. And now we have to look at reality now, and we see that the rich control the political process to such a degree now that they don't answer to the people. Mm-hmm. The politicians don't answer to the people; they answer to their donors. Mm-hmm. And so this has been entrenched even more over the years. So now we have to look at these things, and we have to understand that whatever political theories and methods we come up with has to be based in the grassroots and independent, autonomous of the structures that exist, mm-hmm. the political structures that exist. And so the idea, the appeal of anarchism from the very beginning was that it would be, yes, something that was independent of all of this. But of course, that came with some problems, some conditions. And one of the problems is that they have not allowed it to pertain or extend to colonize and oppress Black peoples and other peoples of color. They have not allowed that. Just like when the criticism of Marxism came along, and we had what we got now is racial capitalism. Well, you can call what I'm doing racial anarchism. You know, in that sense, you know, not in a simplistic sense, but in the fact that the idea that it's Europe and Europeans that only matter, and that a radical ideology and radical concepts only apply to Europeans and the European working class. We need to go beyond that. And that's what I started out fighting to do. And of course, I'm not an academic, and I didn't come out of academia with this idea. I came out of it based on looking at the world and understanding the world I came from and the world I was part of as a Black person, you know. Okay. And so that, to me, it was more important than just whether it's good or bad. The critique is here because they have failed to carry out their historical mission. The critique of socialism, the critique of communism, they have made crimes. They've made crimes out of what started out as an idealistic movement or ideology. They have made crimes out of it. They've killed millions of people. They've arrested and imprisoned millions of people under harsh conditions. And I'm not talking about people who are on the other side as counter-revolutionaries, just people that they, when they get to power, practice terror and dictatorship.
But you know, one of the things with the left, and this is why your book struck me at the time that I came across it, because I spent a lot of time in a lot of different spaces on the left, and
that's why your mind is so warped.
Yes, that is why. But also, one thing that I want to tie in here is I grew up in the church. And that was what started disturbing me, particularly about the US left, because it is so extremely like religious in its ideological standings, and the levels of dogma and orthodoxy and rigidity that you encounter on the US left particularly is shocking to me. And I would be in these spaces, you know, I was you know, in a lot of statist spaces around, you know, particularly around Maoists and Marxist-Leninists, and I would ask questions. I would just ask questions, and it was like you can't question this. Mm-hmm. In the same way that I experienced growing up in the church, and that had to do with that history that you're talking about. Okay, so it was like, where's the internal critique? Where is the admission that everything didn't go right, and that people died, people were killed, people were in prison, people were marginalized? And it was always, you're a cop, you know, that's you're one of the imperialists, you're working for the state. It was always just like this knee-jerk reaction that very much reminded me of when you would question the bishops or the pastor in church. And so that was one of the things that kind of led me to start asking a lot of questions and to be open to reading your text, because your text is extremely confrontational. And you're not an academic, but what you are is, if the US left is a religious movement in many ways, the cultism is, what it is, then what you are is you're a heretic.
Mhm.
And you are someone who is a living contradiction. You disturb the prefix narratives of leftism because you experience those contradictions firsthand, and you embody them and you carry them. And your life is a testimony to the fact that history isn't neat, and patriots are patriots no matter where you go. But this patriotic kind of fervor that we experience on the left that promotes this type of statism that's been so dominant for so long is something that your book just really just comes and starts hitting at really hard. So I want to talk about that too. What was the hardest thing about writing Anarchism and the Black Revolution? You wrote it in prison, you had to
Mhm.
hide it. Let's talk about some of that. Let's talk about what it took to even get this text that was going to get you a lot of criticism anyway for writing. What did it take to even just produce it?
Well, it was seized by authorities several times, and I got to the point where I had to write three different versions of it
Hmm.
and hide them and secret them all over the prison. And then eventually I would get it out by people coming to visit me and so forth and what have you. And, but yeah, I went through a lot. Plus I was punished a hell of a lot, but I was already in a punishment cell. Uh, the, the, um, the detention center in the, what was it? The H block was the behavior modification block in Marion Prison. And so it was there that I started actually writing. I wrote the first version of it, and they attempted to seize it. I got it. I managed to get it out to someone. But other versions that I wrote were seized by authorities and ruled to be contraband or agitating violence or something or other. And I had to make them get off my case. And I filed a lawsuit. I had people in the streets organizing on my behalf and on behalf of prisoners having the right to write. And but at that time, prisoner writings was a very important thing anyway, and it was a great deal of support for it. So the authorities had to back off, and I was able to get the book together and out. And a collective, I managed to get it to some collective called for one of all names, Horse and Goat Collective, in New York City. I don't know. Don't ask me. I don't know any of those people in there. There's one person I dealt with called Ginger Katz or Kates. I can't be sure. But she managed to get it published, and she managed to give me credit for it and so forth. And so it was born, and people started reading it. And it got around pretty good, actually, and I didn't receive as much criticism. There was a lot of what I got was silence, a lot of silence, and that silence meant that we're listening and we are somewhat intimidated, almost. It could mean that. It could mean that we're just angry, fuming, or whatever. Probably a variety of emotions in the anarchist movement. But it was out. It was stating things about their own movement that many of them didn't even know and didn't even put forward. A lot of people didn't even know what libertarian socialism was. They didn't even know what anarchist communism was, and so forth and so on. All these things, they didn't really have any grasp of it. And then this is before a lot of even the academics were doing it. And the academics who did write about it were usually abroad, in Europe or somewhere, or Australia or somewhere. And so the writing was being done, first of all, at the level it was being done, and was being done by someone Black of all, all things, and raising contradictions and criticisms. And I don't think they've ever really gotten over that. I mean, it has won some people over. They've been forced to deal with it.
Mhm.
It has a certain power that they've been forced to deal with. And it also created a split inside the anarchist movement of that day, to where I guess you want to call it, for want of a better word, a better name, an anti-racist faction came into existence and started challenging what was then going on in the anarchist movement and started changing it. And I was both the beneficiary and the victim of it, you know. But just the fact that it was never being discussed before,
Yeah.
never. All this stuff was happening in the 60s. The black revolution was taking place, the black struggle. It never concerned them. They never saw it as being part of something they had to worry about, even though it was a huge part of the society itself. It's just like white Americans generally thought about black power as just a black thing and you shouldn't worry about it. It's peripheral, blah, 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 you know, and that kind of thing. Whereas the other people around the world understood it as a very important development, and that it was a stage away from, or past, transforming from civil rights to black power, a more radical movement, you know, and so forth. And these things were important, but not to most white people, including most activists. Most activists didn't give a damn, and certainly anarchists didn't feel like they had to concern themselves about it at all. And it's embarrassing now when I say this to many of them, but that was the reality. And even today, you know, I've had black anarchists tell me that they're being, you know, ridiculed by white anarchists or white radicals.
And so you really have something here, in my opinion, and I say this a lot in my writing and the way that I'm thinking about your work and the history of Black anarchism more largely, but you really are doing something that is kind of pushing for something that transcends the entirety of the left and Western radicalism as we know it. And the reason I say that is because you're not just critiquing state socialism and statism, you're critiquing anarchism as well. And you're critiquing classical anarchism and European anarchism in a way that is also extremely relevant. And so what you have is something that's calling for something, is a text that's calling for something greater than everything that we know as the left. And it's also still taking the truth of what has worked and what's been good from your history. So you have things that you talk about in the text, like the survival program. You draw from intercommunalism,
mutual aid.
Right. You mutual aid. You talk about a lot of different aspects of the movements that you critique and of the history that you critique. And you're saying, like, we can take these things that are good and that are beneficial and that have been shown to work and do great things for people and advance us towards liberatory politics, but we do not have to fetishize and we do not have to make excuses or ignore the failures and the violence and the problems that have come with a lot of these experiments, and the loss of life, the oppression that has come with it. And so that can kind of lead me into the next question. What do you mean? You're a working class theorist who has developed a expansive view of socialism from below. What do you mean by socialism from below? Why are you a class struggle anarcho-communist? What is it that you're trying to highlight for people?
Well, I'm saying that I'm one of those class that's been ignored. First of all, that there is a class of working class elements that have been ignored in favor of a white fiction, political fiction, and which is what most socialist ideology has been, a political fiction. And so I'm saying that the colonized and the poor and the oppressed Black people and other peoples of color in this country, and this country is not based on democracy. Let's get clear about that. The fascists say that, and some strange way the the so-called left wants to imply that too. Certainly the liberal left wants to imply that somehow this country was founded as a unique nation for freedom and so forth. Maybe freedom for the white people who had money and land, but the majority of people, Black people especially, who were slaves, or who, if they were not slaves, were persecuted. That's a whole different history. And I think that is what colors my thinking. That, as well as a like you said, taking the radical backbone of many of the movements that came along and called it anarchism, called it libertarian socialism, libertarian Marxism. There's all kinds of names for it. But that kind of radical wing, that kind of radical thinking, is what, one, attracted me to anarchism, but two, led me to understand that we need to go beyond orthodoxy. We need to go beyond state socialism, true. We need to go beyond representative capitalism, true. But we also needed to go to a stage where we still need a mass line. We need a mass revolutionary line, but at the same time, it has to be based in the actual material conditions that people live under. Everybody wants to talk about some kind of nebulous thing. That's the difference between me and an academic. I don't argue from the standpoint of theory alone. Theory alone doesn't mean a damn thing to me. Theory only is important when it's attached to changing the material and physical conditions people have to live under. Right. And if we live in a police state, if Black people live in a police state, if we can be gunned down in the street at random, regardless of who we are or what we're doing or whatever, we can be gunned down in the street. If we can be dragged off to prison in massive numbers and kept in there, most of our lives. And if we are in a country that has the largest prison establishment or prison system in the world, or in fact, in world history, then we need to be talking about these things. We need to be organizing around these things. Mm-hmm. But because the weakness and the short-sightedness of anarchism and of the white left, they're not able to even raise up, and we haven't had a mass movement against mass imprisonment in the United States, which is the largest in the world. We haven't had a mass movement against it. Most so-called, anarchist prison support movements are limited to worrying about prisoners from the 1970s. And it's important to still deal with political prisoners, but they can't be the primary thing now. You're not with mass imprisonment, which is a new form of attack by the state. I have not ever been able to convince people of this. I've never been able to make them understand that we need to go beyond giving cookies or sending newsletters into people, and go beyond dealing with the whole question of what the state is doing in terms of mass imprisonment. Right. They just don't get it, and it's because of the white nature of their movement.
Right. So, man, you just said a lot that kind of you shifted me a little bit, and I'm trying to figure out which way I want to go with what you were just talking about.
I always do that, brother. You ought to be used to that by now. You just have to stay on track and ask the question.
I'm trying, man, but me and you will get on the phone and we'll be doing this for hours, man. Me and you and Janina, and yeah. And it's just like I'm so many things you just said. Man, you were really just going in just now. An oversimplified view. Let's try to stay back on the book a little bit. And also for folks who are watching, there is a Q&A. You can drop questions in the chat at the end of this. How are we doing on time? Let me see. It's 11:50. Okay, so we'll keep it moving on the book, because me and you will be talking all day, man.
Yeah, I know.
So drop your questions in the chat, and at the end we'll try to take a few if we can. But the oversimplified view of your work, I feel like, might look at it and say, this is just a bunch of criticism. Like, people might, I know that you have gotten critiqued and criticized for the things you said for years.
Yes.
And that I've seen it. I've seen how it's happened to you historically. I've seen it in present day. People read your work, and because of the religiosity and how it kind of disturbs orthodoxy and actually, pulls at people, they don't want to accept it. And even when I first read it, when I was 22 or 23, uh, I was I was shocked by it. I was kind of like, this is it's a little bit of a shocking book for people because
Mhm.
you're not you're not holding back. You're just saying the things, you know what I'm saying? And so if you're really looking at the text, what you do is you don't just critique and just criticize for the sake of criticizing. You're taking your lived experience and you're developing new thought and developing new practice for people and laying out examples, and you break things down in a really almost encyclopedic way, and you
Mhm.
do that throughout the text. You just explain things in a very basic way for people to be able to digest, and you're not also like anti-intellectual. You don't try to make it this thing to like prove you know that you're real or anything that you know that by trying to put on some sort of front that, you know, oh, it's not that like theory's bad or that you have to, you know, try to make people into masses that don't understand and you have to make it, you know, this or that for them. What you're doing is you're just saying, hey, this is what these things mean to me, and this is what I think we should do for the future. And so why did you write it that way? Why did you take these concepts, different types of anarchism and your relationship to different movements of the past and the way you understand them and explain them? Why did you break it down in that way for people when you wrote
Well,
it?
you know, this book has been called. It surprised me when it was said, but I thought about it later, and it's probably accurate. This is political. This is a political science course for anarchists, in a way. You know, in the sense that yes, I'm taking political ideas and theories, encyclopedic in a sense, and taking them and breaking the ideas down, but doing it within the context of applying it to social life as it exists right now. More and more, that's what I started to do. And certainly I was talking about Black society and Black social life more and more and applying it in terms of anarchism more and more. But the reason I did this way so that people could understand it. I am not one of these kind of people that it's like, I have to say that I don't love poetry. I'm not going to say I hate it. I don't love poetry because it hides its actual intent. I want people to know what I came out of the school, certainly in prison and in the kind of writing that was going down in prison, where it was essayism without prisoners. You know, well, it was written by prisoners, but you know what I'm saying? It's an essay form that takes no prisoners, that states the facts, that lays it out in terms that people would not see before, you know, whether they felt it was genteel or not. You know, we're just giving you the facts and you do what you feel that you have to with them. We're just telling you what you should do, but we're also telling you what it all means, you know, and so that's important because without that, and with ordinary people, if you don't make it plain, and
Mhm.
when I came along, it was a term said Malcolm X, make it plain. And used to talk about the Black Panther Party, and the Black Panther Party newspaper would take what they say were highly complex theories and ideology and break it down so that the average person, the average brother on the block, average sister in the ghetto would be able to break it down and understand it. And not only that, would be able to tell someone else. Now that is political education. That is powerful political education. And I learned that and I incorporated that in this book. I mean, you know, whether I consciously came in doing it and saying that was the main thing I was going to do, but I wanted to be able to explain the terms, first of all, so that there was no mysticism, there was no retreat. You either accepted it or not. If you came out against it, then it was clear that you were against it. You were not going to be able to dance around the edges.
Mm.
And so I think that was really important. I still do think it's important. I still do think it's important to say what you mean and be able to accept the consequences. I know that I have a great many critics. Over the years, I've had nothing but critics. And I think that what you're saying, when we started talking about this, you said it's starting to impact the world, it's starting to reach a lot of different people, and it will reach more.
It already has, man. It
So
already has.
what's happening though, in terms of that, is it's breaking through the wall that's been built, the ideological wall or the political wall. It's breaking through that, it's broken through it, and now it's starting to drown those critics. So for me, I have to look at it in terms of the long struggle. The long struggle. That's 42 years since I started writing this. I've been an anarchist 52 years. And yeah. So what is, and yet there's people who want to claim that I just happened to come along later and they had done all the work and so forth and so on. And you know what I'm saying? You got these sectarian elements, and most of them have been raised up and used by white radicals to try to neutralize me. You know, they've used black people to try to neutralize me, and they've used, you know, individual critics and so forth and so on. And that's fine. If they want to use them, I'll smoke them out. You know what I'm saying? And, but the main thing for me was to continue writing 42 years. Like, think about that, 42 damn years. That's a whole lifetime for a lot of people. And I did it for 42. I didn't even stop to think about it later on. It's just been since we started on this version that I really have started to think about it. How much time has been devoted to this text, and I didn't know this text was making any impact. Quite honestly, I still stand aghast. I hear you saying it, I hear other people saying it, but I don't know it for a fact. I mean, I have not seen the result of it. And I guess maybe that's one of the things I will get to see, hopefully within my lifetime, to see that there is a large body of people who are interested in what I'm saying, even if they don't agree with everything. They give it respect that I've never gotten to this point. I've never gotten this respect.
You're sounding like an individualist anarchist right now, man. You might need to come out that hole, man, and start seeing what your work has done. You might be too isolated over there, man.
Well, if I knew how to do that, I'd have been doing it, my brother. But let me just say that I think that the idea and the counter idea, and basically anarchism and the Black Revolution started off as the idea of combining and comparing revolutionary theories, revolutionary figures and so forth. And I don't claim to know all figures and all the anarchist history and all that stuff. I've never said that. And my kind of anarchist approach has always been in terms of socialism, of a radical perspective. It's not been just this idea that, well, you had blacks over here and you had some Chinese or some Japanese, and they were doing anarchist politics before, you know, in the early 1900s or this, that, and other. I mean, to some people that's important, and I get it, but at the same time, my thing is, I'm a revolutionary. I'm not trying to reform the system. I'm not trying to change everybody's mind just to be changing their minds. I'm trying to foment and implement revolution. I'm trying to enrage the people but yet let them see the possibilities. I'm not trying to do anything but that. And you know, and I think it's important that people, when they get theories and they see ideas, that they understand it. A lot of times people get books and theories and they don't understand a damn thing. They don't understand what the author's saying. And they may even be embarrassed about it that they don't. But I want to write it in such a way that they do understand it. They do get it, that we've taken complicated political theories and broken them down so that people can understand it. You know.
Yeah. That's one of the best things about the text, is that you do that successfully. In my opinion,
Great.
You definitely do it successfully.
Excellent.
I'm going to make a note here too to send you some really good poetry. Because clearly I need to be sending you less articles and more poems.
I don't know about that, bro. I can't attest to that. But the point of what I was saying is, it's not that I want to kill the poets. That's not what I'm saying. It's just I'm saying that poetry, as compared to political treatise, is a different kind of approach. You know, poetry, I mean, it talks about the inner feelings of the heart and so forth, but it doesn't talk about the slave and the master. You know what I'm saying? It doesn't talk about that. And I know there's radical poetry in the 1960s, but the Black poetry movement and all that, but the Black poetry movement was independent of movements like the Black Panther Party, independent of other revolutionary movements, Black movements that today is not even known about. You had there was a Black revolutionary syndicalist movement in Detroit. Among auto workers. There was a hell of a lot of auto workers at that time were Black, and most of our history, if we don't bring it up, nobody else is going to bring it up, or they're not able to bring it up. And then if the academics get it, they bring it up in such a dry and sterile way that people can't understand the vitality of the movement that existed then. Just like when they talk about the Black Panther Party, if it was just an academic talking about it, you may never really get any real understanding of the sweat, blood, and tears related to the struggle. You know what I'm saying? And so that's really important. That's really important.
Yeah, I'm not gonna get started on poetry with you, man. I'll be talking all day.
Well, I know I'm not talking about poetry either. I'm talking about politics.
I love poetry, man. So I'll be on all day on that. But let's dive into some of the Black aspects of this as it relates to Black power and as it relates to Black nationalism. Mm-hmm. You are not interested in romanticizing Black power. You're not interested in romanticizing the party. You're not interested in romanticizing any of these things, and you make it pretty clear. You're pretty blunt about it. Why is it that you're not? Why is it that you are kind of approaching this with a sort of bluntness and internal critique?
Well, I think it's hurt us in the Black movement to have this level of romanticism. For instance, there's so much romanticism about the Black Panther Party and about the movies. There's been 2 movies that come out about the Black Panther Party. One of them was controlled by the state or statist agent. Was written by a stool pigeon, a runaway running dog for the CIA and the FBI. That was the first Panther. And then the second movie on Fred Hampton, they gave too much credence to the informer and agent, police agent who had him killed. And so that's one of my critiques. So and the way they projected the Black Panther Party, it was, it wasn't bad. I mean, but what we haven't had is about what was the program of the Black Panther Party. What were people trying to achieve during that period? And so people, even organizations that have come about, there's been about 25 different groups have come into existence since 1986 that claim to be the new Black Panther Party, this, that, and other. There've been 25 organizations. Yeah. And of those 25 organizations, all of them together have produced less of a mass movement than the original party had. It had 5,000 members, and it had, more importantly, or as importantly, had a mass movement on the periphery with the survival programs. Survival programs were mass struggles in and of themselves, in mass programs. And so if you looked at, in terms of, I say that we have to look at the actual work that groups did, have to look at the actual things that were accomplished. We have to look at also the errors, of which there were quite a few. We have to look at the errors that were made. We have to, and we do this because we want to inform successive generations. And because of the failure of doing that, and because people have allowed this romanticism to go on, you have people coming along, call themselves building new Black Panther parties, and they engage in the worst kinds of excesses and the things that the party had done or were accused of, and that helped to destroy it. They come along and they embrace that. Yeah. And embrace sexism, embrace all kinds of racism, internal racism, and all kinds of garbage. You've heard some of these groups, and a lot of them are influenced by the Nation of Islam originally. But because generations only can deal with what they see at this particular moment in time, some have gravitated to these kinds of groups. You know what I'm saying? But those of us who know the truth, or at least have had, more access to it. I don't claim to know anything more than anyone else, but, and maybe not as many as others that are out there. I'm no academic and I'm no expert on it, but I will just say that the whole reason we learn political theory is not to be deceived by it. We don't learn political history to be deceived by it. We learn to be informed by it and use it as a tool to continue the struggle. If it's not doing that, it's useless.
And
I'm not interested in somebody just talking about somebody, some personality who was the leader of this, that, and the other. I'm interested in going beyond that. What about the rank and file? What did the rank and file do?
Yeah.
And more importantly, what was the rank and file stopped from doing? What they prevented from doing? These are important things.
Yes.
And there are people around right now who know this, but they won't say it.
Yes,
You know?
and you talk, you know, I've talked with Janina before about that, and been writing about it recently, how that happens a lot of times at the expense of women and other marginalized people within movements, how that sort of romanticization of these central figures and of this vanguard ends up creating an environment of abuse and exploitation that still is permeating on the left. We still have a bunch of organizations right now with cultish models and hierarchical leadership, with people exploiting people, abusing people, all types of abusers, and sexual violence being glossed over and protected because it was committed by somebody who is in a prominent position within an organization. We see this stuff happening still on the left, and it all is connected to a lot of the things that you're trying to tear down in this text. And so, staying focused again, why isn't state socialism, why isn't the state, why isn't that the answer, Lorenzo? Why is that not enough? Why are we going to have to think beyond the state and work beyond the state? Why isn't that the answer?
Well, right now, the state's a living institution. I mean, the nation state is failing, and that's something I'll talk about later, but the state is a living institution, and it's a dangerous institution that's imprisoning millions of people, that's killing millions of people through wars, through mass imprisonment, through any number of ways. You know what I'm saying? So it's a coercive institution. But to say it's a coercive institution in the sense that most anarchists have said, is like they want to have a free state so they can do anything they want to individualistically. I'm not interested in individualism. I'm interested in changing society as a whole. And dealing with like we used to have this critique saying, I'm not interested in changing my lifestyle. I'm interested in changing my life. You know, and that was an important statement at the time, because what it meant was, within an anarchist movement that had so much lifestyleism, that's so much posturing and so much of this whole thing of strutting around in combat boots and all that, but you know, and it's just childishness, infantile leftism. Lenin wasn't wrong about that one. There's a lot of infantile leftism, and especially in this period. But we want to go beyond that. I'm not interested in just shattering a damn window at a McDonald's. What the hell? I ain't gonna overthrow the state like that. But there's people believe that that's revolutionary process. That's for them, that's revolutionary process.
Yeah.
You know, for us, we trying to keep our bodies from being shattered by police bullets.
That's right.
You know, we're trying to trying to stay out of prison and live a life.
That's right.
You know, rather than be scooped up and put in prison and then discovered 45 or 30 years later that he didn't do it. You robbed him of his life. That's not freedom. That's not justice.
Yeah.
You know, come along 40 years later after you're damn near dead, and still, like Malcolm X said, to stab you in the back with a knife and then pull out 2 inches of the knife.
Right.
And that ain't you're not freeing anybody. You know, that ain't no progress. So we need to challenge these things, and we need to get used to doing it on a daily basis.
Yeah.
You know, so it ain't a high intellectual bar, in my estimation.
You keep saying lifestyle, you keep talking about the lifestyle anarchist, and it really, what we see also too, I wanted to make a quick point. What we see too is we see a sort of lifestyle Black nationalism too. It is
the same.
You see so many activists today from my generation who are just parroting and cosplaying this type of Black nationalism and this type of Black activists of the past. A lot of times who are liberals who really don't actually want to take the material element organizing and put it into practice. And you also have folks on the left who are kind of doing that sort of same sort of uh, uh, I'm the leader. I know everything because I'm a revolutionary. This sort of theatrics. It's really kind of gross right now, and the way that Black Power has also been absorbed into popular culture
Right.
in a way that it's being sold to people. It's really gross.
Well, it's
Um,
not a threat. It's not
yeah,
a threat. I mean, it used to be at one point, perhaps, when it first came on the scene in the 60s, and so forth, it was seen as a threat to white society. Now it's just another thing,
yeah,
another thing, and it's not going to liberate Black people. It's not. In most instances, you find all these groups that have been around for years that talk about building nation states and all this other stuff. They don't talk about building liberation. They don't talk about, you have to go to war with these people that are holding us in power. They don't talk about a revolutionary social change movement at all. It's always some kind of way, a soft leftist approach to where, they're trying to just convince people um, to join in what they're doing, and they're hooked up most of the time now. Most of these Black left elements and others are hooked up directly to the Democratic Party. And the Democratic Party these are some of their front groups. We always talk about front groups back in the day. The Communist Party or whatever would have some kind of front group. It may have been Black, may have been whatever. And this is what the Democratic Party has been doing for quite some time. They've been coming in, they've created their own left liberalism. That's why I speak in terms of left liberalism, because this is what they've done. And now the Black nationalists, a considerable core of the Black nationalists, are in the Democratic Party as an outright element of their struggle, of their movement. They exist basically to lead Black people into the Democratic Party, to captivate people around just the idea and the style, as opposed to the idea and the struggle and the whole idea of struggling in inner city communities, which I always have felt that the struggle in inner city communities was in fact a way of determining whether or not a group is serious or not, because they
yeah,
have to go and deal with real people, as opposed to some two-faced academic or whatever the case may be, or some fake nationalist. A lot of them, as I said, brothers saying that they wear a red, black, and green liberation jumpsuit just for this occasion. you know,
yeah, yeah,
these are people that have been around a long time, the fake politicians and all this, and they fake
yeah,
this mystique of that there's a Black nationalist or a Black state. Now, whether it's Wakanda, the white man created Wakanda. The white man did it. Now, that's the whole thing. I tell people, I say, Wakanda didn't come out of a Black man's imagination. It came out of a white man's imagination. And then the white man turned, after Black people fell in love with it and all this other kind of stuff, the white man turned around and let it, had it destroyed, and had Black Panther killed. So I mean, this is a joke. The symbolism, it's all about symbolism, as opposed to actual conditions that people are forced to live under. We're Black people in the United States and other parts of the world that are forced to, along with the same social regime, are forced to live under conditions now that are worse than when we started out, with these struggles in the 60s. You got more people in prison by far. I mean, you got more people being killed every day in the streets.
yeah,
I mean, the
yeah,
police have become a death squad. I wrote about that 15 years ago.
yeah,
But they become a death squad to why they're just killing anyone at random, and they've been given government impunity to do so. That's one of the things we got to realize. Somebody say, well, we're trying to end um, state violence.
yeah.
I'm trying to end the state.
Hey.
I'm not trying to end just a state violence as some kind of liberal reform movement, or what I'm saying. That's what we need to recognize
Well,
this is.
that's what we're talking about. That's what we're really talking about with, in terms of all of the various ways that the abolition movement is going. Like, that's one of the things that I think is so important, is talking about abolishing the state and not trying to reform the state. into another apparatus with new administrators and
Right.
a different name and just an we're not trying to have state capitalism and think that that's going to be a revolutionary change. Lorenzo, we have to answer some of these questions,
Okay.
man, because like I said,
Yeah, we even
get
going
out,
through
we will get out of control, man. We'll
okay.
be out of control.
All right, we got to answer some questions. Have we even got to?
Yo, I got a question for you. So,
all right.
We have a question here from Argentina. What do you think the future of Black anarchism and organizing is in the U.S.?
Well, I think that, because of it being outlawed more or less and demonized by the anarchist movement, it's going to become an autonomous movement. And I'm not going to say it's going to be a hostile movement, although there's going to be some of that until people understand that they cannot dictate what kinds of movement comes about in terms of anarchism. And that, you've had years and years of ethnic groups formed anarchist movements of all sorts, but they've been European. And so they have not been challenged to the degree that Black people have been challenged. The very idea that Black people would try to organize some kind of movement within anarchism or autonomous of anarchism, you know what I'm saying? That has created a fundamental problem for the anarchist movement as a whole. But the independent movement, the autonomous anarchist movement, Black anarchist movement, is in position to build something entirely new, something based and in terms of the practice method, the method of practice, the organizing method, they're in a position to change even the so-called Eurocentric movement, change it, its approach, its ideas, and so forth. So I think at one point it has the potential to be one of the main motors of anarchism from this point forward. Okay. It may call itself something else, but it's going to be made into a autonomous movement because of the hostility it's receiving right now from white anarchists.
Can I ask you also too, I see a couple of questions in here. Can you speak to a sort of internationalism and global perspective about solidarity and struggle with alongside people in the global South? Also maybe kind of speak to some of your thoughts around Pan-Africanism as a process towards a global socialism and freedom. Can you share some of your thoughts on that, just kind of generally?
Well, actually, Black autonomy came into existence. If you read the book, that's an important thing to get people to read the book. But if they read the book, they'll find out that, from inception, and when I started writing about this, when I got to the stage of writing about an independent Black autonomous movement, it was with the idea that it would be about international organizing, right, from inception. But internationalism, as the white left has defined it, or the white leftists practice it, means that peoples in other parts of the world are expected to just follow behind the white left. They're not expected to create autonomous movements. And autonomous movement doesn't mean that you do what white people do and just say that you're part of the movement now. It means that you can create something that's different based on your material resources, based on your material condition and your history. You can build that kind of movement and not just be a prisoner to the idea that everything you build has got to be based on what was in Europe. We're going beyond that now, and we're building new history. We have to build new history. And new history is also new forms of anarchism and international solidarity. Well, international solidarity has been patently phony up to this point, to be quite honest. It hasn't been real. It hasn't been real at all. It's been whatever those in the West or those from positions of power are willing to give those of us on the bottom. And we're not talking about that. We're talking about fighting for ourselves, first of all. And if people are going to come from a position of solidarity, they're going to be part of the struggle and have to put their lives on the line.
Mm.
And they're going to have to follow behind the leadership of the peoples of color or the peoples who are oppressed. They're going to have to not exercise white privilege or exercise white control, political control, as has been done throughout the years up to this point.
The Western left and the U.S. left, I think, struggles with what you just said.
I know.
Because so many of the ways I see people talking about other countries, it turns entire populations of people into one thing. And that is something I've been thinking about a lot, you know, hearing these statements around that are supposed to be about solidarity with folks in the global South, with folks in other countries. A lot of times it is it's difficult for me to see the realization in them that people are not just some mass that you can assign and attach your ideological position to and try to make into something to advance your efforts. People have desires and hopes and dreams for their own lives that may have nothing to do with what you're thinking from your MacBook in your apartment in the West. You know, it's something I've been thinking about a lot lately, and you really just touched on that. What also would you say? This is another question. What would you say people should do to build? What should people do today to build liberation? What's your stance on organizing? What, if any, organizational forms can help us build collective power?
For 52 years, I have advocated community-based or revolutionary community-based organizing. For 52 years, I've advocated that, and the anarchists have rejected it.
Yeah.
For all those years, whether I was on the bricks or not myself, it's always been about the kind of ideology and organization in actual material spaces in neighborhoods and communities and so forth to try to see. We don't know what will work and not until we attempt it, but we have to be there to organize and to live in the spaces and where people are, as opposed to living on the college campus or in a privileged space and then just theorize about it. I don't theorize. I'm living in the ghetto right now in Kansas City, Missouri. And, you know, I hear the shooting and all this other kind of stuff all the time and everything. And I understand why this is happening.
Yeah.
More importantly. And my thing is, if I'm not on the scene, I'm not saying that everyone has to live in the ghetto. That's fraudulent in my perspective, but I'm just saying this is what's happening to me now. And people have to understand that you can't see where people are and what's happening to Black people as a whole, but you can't see that if, in point of fact, you don't address it at all, you know. And so that's why you got so much of this kind of Black nationalism that's middle class, really middle class, upper middle class, actually, petty bourgeoisie or Negrozy or whatever you want to call it. And these elements don't speak for Black people. They just want to utilize the condition of the oppressed condition of Black people to empower themselves and their ilk. This is what they're interested in doing. And this is why I say that anarchism can't never be allowed to morph into some kind of just Black nationalist entity alone. I'm opposed to that. But now I can't stop what other people come along with, what their ideas are and so forth and so on. And people are building movements and so forth. And I can respect what they're doing, even if I differ. You know, I'm not one of these, I'm not like the people who confronted me saying that I couldn't do anything and that whatever I did was wrong. You know, I'm not telling people that. They have to be allowed to develop. Now, others of us who have political differences can state those differences and so forth. But we have to, first of all, understand that we're not going to ever get free under this system. It's never going to happen. I don't give a damn if the Democrats all of a sudden turn all black. You know, if all black, what we got is black presidents from here on out, it's not freedom.
Yeah.
And we had a taste of it with Obama. And Obama was not his own man. It was obvious. And he was under the control of the rich of Wall Street. And if you wanted a pure example of it, you can see it. You know, you can examine it and see it for yourself. So that's what I would say is that we're at a stage right now where Black nationalism, certain kinds of radicalism, even socialism, have been captured by the state, captured within the Democratic Party.
Mm-hmm.
And they're stronger, they may be stronger than what's outside of the Democratic Party.
So we're getting close to time here, and I'm trying to figure out how I want to wrap this up. I want to just go back quickly and say again that, man, I'm really excited for you, man. I know that this is a huge moment in your life, and don't think I'm absurd for saying this, but I'm very proud of you. And I know I don't know if I'm in a position to even say I'm proud of you, but I am proud of you.
Well, sure, you're in a position.
I mean, I have a lot of love for you, man. You really changed my life, and I want to thank you for everything that you've taught me and everything that you've shown me over the years. And it's important to me to encourage people to engage your work and to approach it with an open mind. And you know, the fact that you're living and that you're telling your story is monumental. It's huge. You are somebody who's been imprisoned in several parts of the world.
Yeah.
You've been called every name in the book. You've been called a terrorist. You know, you have been tortured. You've been threatened. People have made attempts on your life. It just, so much has happened, and you're still here, and you're still doing it, man. And I just want to say, man, I really have a lot of respect and admiration for you, and I thank you for everything that you've done for this movement. I want people to feel encouraged to order your book and to engage it. There's information in the chat in terms of the social media that we talked about earlier, all the folks who are associated with this event, Auburn Avenue Research Library, On Our Own Authority, AK Press. You can find all the social media in the chat for everybody that's watching. One last thing I do want to ask you, Lorenzo, what are you working on for the future? What are your plans? What are you writing? What are you thinking about doing? What are you trying to get out there so that people continue to engage your work? Because you have done much more than Anarchism and the Black Revolution. You're a prolific writer. What else do you have that you're trying to send down the pipeline?
Well, I need to take those prolific writings, as you put it, and put them in some kind of format and that's what I'm working on. I'm trying to take the writings around Black autonomy and first of all, to explain it to people as a movement. It was the first Black anarchist formation, you know, federation that was created. And I'm trying to write about it and give a history of it, as well as have some of the documents and stuff from that period and the work that we did. And also trying to do whatever I can do to help the creation of an even larger, a really massive Black anarchist tendency in this period. And I'm thinking of some kind of conference or something or other, you know, whatever way I can get to people in this period. It should be easier than it would be otherwise. But trying to do that. And I'm working on my autobiography, which I started writing my autobiography around the same time or same time frame of when I was in the prison system in Marion. I had nothing but time. You know, I was locked up in solitary confinement all that time, and so I started writing. And so I started writing as best I could, because I had no, real understanding or anything to compare to for what an autobiography should look like, what I should cover, and so forth. But I started writing about it, started writing about my upbringing, started writing about my understanding of the world and how I came to, have certain ideas and so forth. And I didn't even write about my history as an anarchist, and 52 years of my life has been as an anarchist, but I didn't at that time even write about it because I was putting those things in anarchism in the Black Revolution.
Yeah.
And that was more important to me at that time than even writing about myself as an individual, And so I'm going to correct that, at least to try to come out with a book so people can understand you, understand where you came from easier. You know what I'm saying? They can say, okay, I can understand how he arrived at his positions and so forth and so on. And those things are important. Otherwise, it just seems sometimes alien or somebody just spouting off, just spouting off. But there's a history involved with it. And there's a whole lived experiences involved with it. So I'm going to work on my autobiography, and I'm going to work on a history of Black autonomy, and which leads us up to a current history of, Black anarchism, which some people are trying to even claim that somehow Black autonomy is not Black anarchism, or that it has nothing to do with it. It's just some kind of Marxist thing. I don't know what kind of sectarian arguments they're making, but I'm going to set the record straight as to who did what and where and when, so that it would be no doubt about it. Be no doubt about it whatsoever,
Yeah. This is the book, everybody. I know Lorenzo's ready to get his copy.
I'm ready to get mine. Everybody's else to get it.
Man, listen, the same thing happened to me, brother. Like, it happened to me too. Like, everybody was getting advanced copies of my book before I got mine. I said, man, why's everybody got it except me? But yeah, this is the book, everybody. Go ahead and get your copy. It's got a short autobio in the beginning that you provide. It's got it's got the interview that you and I did last year in there, which is really exciting. And it also has a new introduction from Joy James. And all of this is, like I said, really monumental. It's really exciting. I hope people will go out and pick it up. I think we need to stop talking, man, because if we don't stop now, I think that it's gonna just keep going and going and going.
What have we got, an hour and a half?
We did it, man. We did an hour.
Oh, I'm sorry. I told you there wouldn't be any problem covering it. I knew that.
I mean, like I was trying to be, like, hey, we're gonna be on point and we're gonna be keeping it tight. But we could really just talk and talk and talk, and we do this.
William, don't feel bad, because when you're dealing with living organisms, they're going to do things how they do them. You know what I'm saying?
So that now.
They say, I'm gonna do what it do, baby. That's it. And so we're on talking about very important issues, more so than people think, because that's one of the things I never even got to say. We're going into a crisis where it isn't a choice anymore. Yeah. It's going to be socialism or barbarism. Yeah. And barbarism is fascism. So, you know what I'm saying? So we're going to have what I call anarchist socialism or libertarian socialism. It's going to be that, or it's going to be nothing. And we're going to be wiped out. Or there's going to be, a tremendous civil war, and the fascists will take over, and all. This is where we're standing right now. And we're within 5 years of a massive struggle taking place for the life of not only this country, but of the people and of the world, because these fools that run the system have made it possible for industrialism has destroyed the base of this planet. Yeah. And now global warming has been unleashed, or what they call climate change, blithely call it climate change, has been unleashed, that we could be destroyed. We could be destroyed, obviously, a number of ways. That's the thing about it. You can get killed from a nuclear war with these fools that have nuclear weapons. We could be killed through a planetary catastrophe, like climate change. We can be killed any number of ways. We can starve the damn death when the system collapses, and it's going to collapse. The nation state is a failure. It's going to become more and more apparent that it's a failure. All these things are going to threaten our lives if we're not ready, if we don't have some kind of survival program, and we don't have some sort of revolutionary tendency in place to challenge all this stuff and overthrow it.
Absolutely. And that method that you're pointing to, like of thinking outside the state and using the politics of Black anarchism, I think is one of the most important things people can be exploring right now, because
Right.
it is a matter of fact, especially for me and you speaking
No
as Black
question.
people in the United States, that we
Mhm.
have always had to think and operate outside of the state. It has never been the answer for us. And
You know,
so
yes.
we have to do this at this moment. It's absolutely crucial. We have to think beyond it. This form is destroying the planet and causing and
Mm.
wreaking havoc. And it's not just a good versus bad state thing. It's about what is inherent in that structure,
Right.
what it means for the planet. That's one of the most important conversations that we can be having and thinking about as we're moving forward with our
Yeah.
organizing and with our work and the ways we all contribute collectively to struggle. So we thank you for putting forth an example
Yeah.
for such a long time ago and bringing it to people now to have this conversation and do this work and keep going
Well,
and keep
thank
fighting.
you for your help in bringing me forward, and so I can even reach some of these people and reach some of these elements that want to get the word out, and want to understand what my writings have been about and what I've been about over these years. And I appreciate that a great deal, because a lot of people can go through their entire lives and just die in obscurity,
Yeah.
and so this gives me an opportunity to perhaps reach more people that they'll understand where I came from or what I'm doing, or while I'm still alive, what I believe in, and that's important. That's really important. Otherwise, people try to pretend you don't even exist. I've
Yeah.
had that as a strategy against me.
Yeah, well, it's an honor. It's an honor to have worked with you and to have thought alongside you and been able to absorb any little bit of information from you. It's really been an honor. I cherish it every day. And
Both ways, my brother, both ways.
thank you, thank you. So I want to say thanks to everybody for watching this and for participating. Again, the social media is in the chat for all of the organizations that supported this. Thank you to everybody. Thanks to AK, thanks to Pluto, thanks to Auburn, Honor on Authority. Thanks to the Atlanta Radical Book Fair crew. This has been an amazing conversation. I
Mhm.
hate that we can't just talk and talk and talk. There's so much more. There's so many questions we didn't get to answer,
Mhm.
but maybe we'll do something again, man. And so
We have to.
until until then, thanks everybody for listening. And yeah, we'll hope that you all have a good weekend. Stay safe with your family, your community, and keep organizing, keep doing your work, keep doing what you can to contribute to struggle and fighting back. And everybody have a great weekend.
All right.